Welcome back, everyone. How are we? There's only sort of really one big story this weekend, isn't there? We've got Lee Wood and Josh Warrington too. Ryan Garcia and Barrios. Ryan Garcia looked very good. Barrios, though, he is what he is, and he's probably the weakest of the champions. And Garcia now WBC champion. That will come into play in a little bit. Lee Wood, Josh Warrington. Lee Wood looked pretty good, dominated really with a jab. Probably at the end of his career, but, still got a bit and had a comfortable win, didn't he? Great atmosphere in there. Dave Allen as well. Dave Allen stopped on his, can you call that an opponent? Stopped him with two heavily illegal shots, by the way, didn't he? No one's really talked about that. Both of them knockdown punches were clearly right on the back of the head. But anyway, Dave has an easy night's work. But there is really only one story dominating the boxing media this weekend and the boxing outlets, and that is Conor Benn leaving Eddie Hearn for Dana White and Zuffa, which has been a story of much controversy and debate, hasn't it, over the weekend. This really is kind of, depending on what sort of side of the fence you fall, there are quite a few angles to come at this from, isn't there? A lot of the hating of Eddie Hearn, a lot of that camp will say, serves him right. Eddie Hearn, people don't feel sorry for him because, he kind of deserved this. He's done it to other people. People will reference Ben Whittaker and the fact that he'd done the same to Ben Shalom, kind of, by taking Ben Whittaker in the way that he did. So a lot of people will see, like, well, it's Eddie Hearn, who cares? Had it coming anyway, which is fair enough. Fair enough point of view. And I've always said for a long time that I don't have an issue with fighters making as much money as possible. So the fact that Conor Benn decided to leave for 8 figures, apparently for a one-fight deal, which sounds a bit odd. I don't know if you believe that. I'm not sure I believe that's for a one-fight deal. Though saying that with the sort of billions they've got behind them, Zuffa, it wouldn't surprise me. First off, I think the move is just a pure flex on behalf of Dana White and Zuffa, saying this is how easily we will cherry pick what we want from whoever we want at whenever we want. And that's what they've done. Conor Benn on the face of it isn't worth that money, is he? Everyone has a market value, so I suppose it's down to market value what dictates what they're worth and what they're not. But you would think a fighter in Conor Benn, even though I was listening to Ade last week, and Ade was saying that when he was in America, everyone knows who Conor Benn is. Everyone was talking about Conor Benn. So that's fair enough. So he has got some marketability in the States. But in terms of what he's done, not winning an area, not winning a British, not winning a Commonwealth, not winning a European, his best wins are, you would say, the win over Chris Eubank Jr., who was not there on the night. Talk about shot and then some. And then you've got his wins over Chris Van Heerden. Who else? Formella was a good win. And what's his name? Works on TV broadcast, doesn't he? Guy with glasses. Forget his name. You know what I'm talking about. So he hasn't really done anything, has he? I think most of Conor Benn's popularity has come off really the first Eubank fight in which he lost, because at least he showed him that he was a genuine fighting man, a genuine fighting heart. He could take a beating and he could stay in there, and he had guts for days, which I can't take that away from him. But on the face of it, you wouldn't think his market value is that sum of money, what he's been paid. And to me, it's just a flex by Dana White. As Dana White was in a post-fight presser for the UFC at the weekend, he said it was like beating up babies, essentially taking the food off Eddie Hearn's table. So people will also say that Eddie Hearn only, and then this is where this sits for me. Now, anyone who's involved in business is business. Someone said to me a long time ago, family's family, but business is business. And I get it, and it is, it's true. But regardless of the motivations that Eddie Hearn had for sticking his neck on the line, sitting on TalkSport, taking the shellacking off Simon Jordan multiple times, risking sort of reputation of Eddie Hearn, the reputation of Matchroom, and putting it all on the line for Conor Benn. Now, the flip side of that, people will say, well, he was doing that because Conor Benn was a commodity. He was only doing that because Conor Benn had a significant market value in the UK. And also, so there's also look at it this way. Eddie Hearn had no guarantee of recouping the money that he had lost through when the first Ben Eubank fight fell through because of Conor Benn. So, of course, Eddie Hearn is going to have a commercial interest in Conor Benn and a motive for sticking by him through the Clomid thing. He's already lost a load of money, and I'm going to stick by him, so I want to make sure I recoup some of that money. And on top of that, probably make a bit more as well. Remember, that is what promoters do. That is a promoter's job. But listening to especially Frank Smith said today on an interview that he'd been on a holiday with Conor Benn, not being no business surrounding it, just personally. And that's Frank Smith. I like to think that Eddie Hearn, I like Eddie Hearn, regardless. A lot of people are going to say in the comments, Eddie Hearn's this, Eddie Hearn's that, whatever. The reason why Eddie Hearn, and some will say this was sort of maybe slightly complacent and arrogant, that Eddie Hearn didn't have these fighters tied into long-term sort of roll-on contracts, as he never did with Carl Froch, as he never did with Tony Bellew. They were just almost, almost a silent gentleman's agreement. I'm with Eddie Hearn. Dillian White wasn't either. He just used to get whatever. I'm not sure Dave Allen did either. So fighters just were with the Hearns. The Hearns looked after them, and it wasn't needed on paper. Now, call that short-sighted, call that arrogant, call that complacent, and I suppose it could be all three. So there's a certain amount of blame, I suppose. Eddie Hearn's going to look back and think, fuck, why haven't I tied these guys in? But Eddie Hearn's thinking, as we all thought, that these relationships run a bit deeper. Now, when it goes back to that whole that business is business, now that is true. But there's also, whether it's generational, because I'm old, maybe like back in our day, there was a bit of, even in business, there was a way of going about things. Now, if it's correct that Eddie Hearn receives an email from Conor Benn telling him of this, and at which point Eddie Hearn either emailed back or messaged back and said, look, I think, can we have a phone conversation? And Conor Benn just replied no. Regardless of whether, and yes, certainly Eddie Hearn stuck his neck on the line for Conor Benn to recoup lost funds and to gain some pay from it. He's a promoter, that's what he does. But he still didn't have to. He could have cut his losses, and there was a lot of pressure to do so. There was never any guarantee that Conor Benn was going to, generate the amount of money that maybe he had. So it was still a gamble to some degree. And yes, it was about recouping funds, but yes, a certain amount of it because he felt that the relationship went a little bit deeper than business. And maybe that's his fault. Maybe that's Eddie Hearn's fault. Maybe Eddie Hearn got done. And maybe Hearn was going to learn from this experience. But there is still a way to go about things that shows you that you've got a little bit of honour, a little bit of integrity, Because if that business relationship was just pure business, and at this point, from all we've heard, this didn't happen. But for me, if it was me, Conor Benn should have contacted Eddie Hearn and said, look, this is what I've been offered. This is what they're offering me. I'll be an absolute mug to pass this up. But I'm going to tell you, because if you can match this with the same opportunities, then I'm with you, Eddie. I'm with you. But if you can't, even if it's just for one fight, if that's to be believed, Eddie, I've got to go, brother. I've got to go for the money. And I'm sure Eddie would have said, look, I'm sad, but, I understand. But it's just the way that he went about it. The way that he went about it is just a bit of a shit cunt move. And it doesn't show the greatest character. It doesn't show the greatest integrity. And like I said, I don't blame Conor Benn for going for the money. But there are just ways that you think you could go about it, especially when, and as Eddie Hearn, we know, lent Conor Benn hundreds of thousands through that period where he had no licence. And again, yes, he was going to recoup that. Fair enough. But he's still done it. He didn't have to. Could have cut his losses. Regardless, it's just the way he's gone about it. And when Conor Benn was constantly saying it's his dream to win the WBC green belt, it's his dream to win the dream strap. And now he's gone to Zuffa. They must have offered him the green strap. But wasn't Zuffa's thing about creating a UFC-style model in boxing? that they would have their own ring stroke Zuffa belts, and they were going to get rid of and make obsolete the four major sanctioning bodies. Because I don't believe, I'll be surprised if Conor Benn went on the belief that I'm going to pay you this money, but when you're not going to box for any WBC title, you're going to box for our title. I mean, if that is the case, that makes Conor Benn look even worse, doesn't it? Because all of that wanting to win the famous green belt went out the window when there were enough dimes were flashed in front of your face. I also don't believe that Dana White, no matter how hard he flutters his eyelashes at Conor Benn, will treat him the same or look after him the same or have his interests the same as what Eddie Hearn did. I believe if you look at the UFC, when someone becomes surplus to requirements, they are surplus to requirements. And Conor Benn will be the same. Conor Benn is not no matter how big a name he is here, and even though he's known in the States, I wouldn't call him a marquee name. He's certainly not an elite level fighter yet. Whether he will be, that's another thing. The other thing is, Conor Benn was hated by the British public after the Clomid thing. Absolutely hated, despised, booed everywhere. You only got to go in any sort of live stream on YouTube or any of the boxing outlets on YouTube and look at the comments when anything surrounding Conor Benn. They're largely fucking negative. He became somewhat accepted again by a portion of the boxing public after the first Eubank fight, just for the bravery he showed. And then after winning the second one, he regained a little bit of love from a certain portion of the public. Still far from a lot of them. Still, a lot of people still hated him for the whole Clomid thing. And I always give him the benefit of the doubt on that. I won't go back. I made lots of videos. I liked Conor Benn. But Conor Benn was hated. He then regained a little bit of that and was now sort of accepted and he had a little bit of a fan base back again. If Conor Benn fights in the United Kingdom again or next, he will be fucking hated by everyone again. And he may not care. Of course he doesn't care. All he cares about is his family and himself. And he's right to, because fans are not going to fucking be with you once the lights have gone off and people have stopped chanting your name. So he's every right to. But it's an indication of, it'll be an indication of the man. It's kind of like you become a sum of sort of the parts, the people you hang about with, or you know, that sort of stuff. And people are going to see, they're going to look like, no, the kid's an arsehole, you know? And like I said, I've made many videos kind of defending him and kind of being a fan, and it has changed my view. It has changed my view to a degree. And I reiterate the point, I don't care, I don't hold nothing against him for going for money, going for the big money, earning as much as he can in a short career that he's going to have. But they're just ways of doing it. There are ways of doing it that shows that you've got a bit of integrity and a bit of code about you. And they go a long way. That's a big part of being a man, is that. And he's just shown he hasn't got it. And remember, on top of all of this, we still, to this day, have not heard the reasons, the scientific proof, the dossier of why he failed the Clomid test. At this point, what can be the legal reason for not sharing those details with us? Can you think of any? I can't think of any. What can be the legal reason now you can't share that with the public? So I just think it's rude. It's not a thing that shows you, you know, it shows that you're lacking of certain qualities to me that are important for all decent people to me. Fair play. Like I said, I'll reiterate it over and over again, just so no one gets it twisted in the comments. I don't blame him for going for the money, for making as much money as he can, for maximising his earning potential. I don't blame him. But there are ways you could have done it, and there are ways you could have gone about it. And this just doesn't reflect good on you at all, you know? And again, wherever you sit with Eddie Hearn, I think Eddie Hearn probably learned a valuable lesson, because he probably never expected it like that from a person like that. So yeah, all in all, I can see the arguments on both sides, but I don't care what anyone says. There are certain ways you handle yourself and go about handling your business, and that didn't reflect good on him for me. And I'm not really a fan anymore. I don't know. Anyway, I'll see you all soon.